come in kind of thing?
It is now broadcast to all attendees, so we'll wait until people join the room. We will start at 12.
And it's showing as recording. I don't know if you want to pause the recording for now.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I would like to welcome you to our webinar on Appreciative Advising, hosted by TEXAAN Southeast Region. I am Brandon Ward. I am the Southeast Region Chair, and it is my pleasure to be with you today, even somewhere in Houston with raining and flooding. I want to say that this event is free, and it is free as a result of the sponsorship of the Higher Education Coordinating Board and also through the coordination of the Executive Board. Before I introduce our speaker today, I would like to have a few announcements. TEXAAN will have a drive-in hosted by the East Region on August 6th from 8:30 a.m. to 3 o'clock p.m. and registration is now open. The price of the drive-in is $10 currently through the 31st of July, and it will go up to $25 from the 1st to the 5th. So once again, it's the only announcement that I have. I want to once again welcome everyone to our webinar on Appreciative Advising. We have over 390 people to sign up for this webinar, which I think is the record for TEXAAN. So I want to give a hand clap to Dr. Bloom for attracting all these marvelous people. Let me move on. So if you are not a member of TEXAAN, I would like for you to please join. The price currently is $25, and we have a range of benefits. All of these can be found on the TEXAAN website, texaan.org. Also, I want to mention for the drive-in on August 6th, there will be a live DJ. The theme of the drive-in is Thriving Through a Crisis. What is happening in 2020 and how have universities made adjustments? So without further ado, I would like to formally introduce our speaker for today. Dr. Jenny Bloom is our speaker. She joined the faculty of the Department of Education Leadership and Research Methodology at Florida Atlantic University in August 2015. In August 2019, she was promoted to full professor with tenure. In addition, she is the coordinator of the Higher Education Leadership Master's Program, and she founded the Office of Appreciative Education in FAU in 2015. She has worked as Provost Fellow, where she coordinated the leadership and professional development initiatives during the 2019 and 2020 academic year. Dr. Bloom is a co-founder of the Appreciative Advising and Appreciative Education movements. She established the annual Appreciative Advising Summer Institute and the Appreciative Education Conference and an online Appreciative Advising course, the process for certifying Appreciative Advisors and other exciting initiatives related to Appreciative Advising. Dr. Bloom served as 2007-2008 president of National Academic Advising Association, also known as NACADA. She was named the recipient of the NACADA Virginia and Gordon Award for Excellence in the Field of Advising in 2017. She received the NACADA Outstanding Advising Administrator Award in 2005, the University of Illinois Campus Academic Professional Excellence Award in 2007. In 2008, she received the University of South Carolina's Black Graduate Student Association Faculty Mentor Award. And you have a lot of awards, Dr. Bloom. In 2011, she was named the Faculty Partner of the Year by the Division of Student Affairs and Academic Support at the University of South Carolina. At FAU, she was named the Faculty Partner of the Year to the Division of Student Affairs, the Chi Sigma Alpha Honor Society Advisory of the Year, and the Graduate Academic Advisor of the Year by the FAU Graduate and Professional Student Association. She has co-authored 6 books and numerous articles and has presented work at over 350 institutions and conferences. So without further hesitation, let's get Dr. Bloom on and we can start the webinar. Thank you, Dr. Bloom.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction and welcome everybody. I am broadcasting live from my home and we have a storm that is rolling in, so we may hear some thunder in the background. I really appreciate the opportunity to spend this time with you. What an interesting time we live in right now. Before I kind of get started on appreciative advising, I just want to share some of the things that have helped me kind of deal with all of the uncertainty that we've been experiencing. And the first one, well, that's me. So hello, I am, my pronouns are she, her, hers. My preferred name is Jenny. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. So the first thing that's really helped me deal with the uncertainty is this quote from Marie Forleo, who has a book out by this name, and it's "Everything is figure outable." And we are obviously dealing with all kinds of things that nobody anticipated even 6 months ago. And I know we've had to kind of do a lot of pivoting here at FAU in terms of our Appreciative Advising Institute. We took it from an in-person event to an online event in June, and we're going to do it again in a couple of weeks. And that was the phrase that kept us going. Another phrase that has been helpful for me is this by Glennon Doyle, who says, "We can do hard things." We've got a lot of hard things ahead of us. We've been dealing with a lot of hard things, and I believe in our power to work together to deal with so many issues, from racial injustice to what does reopening in a few weeks look like from the pandemic, etc. And then the other phrase that that I've been asking myself is this by Cy Wakeman. If you were great right now, Jenny Bloom, what would great look like? Trying to really live out the don't settle phase of appreciative advising, and this question has really helped me to be better, to not get caught up in whining, because I can be really good at whining, and instead this question makes me realize I can do better. So if you were great right now, what would great look like? So we are really fortunate to work in higher education, and this is a quote from Joe White. He's the former president of the University of Illinois, and he says, "Education is the most powerful means of increasing individual opportunity and for creating more prosperous, fair, and just societies." So to have the privilege of participating in that mission is as much as anybody could hope for in life. And again, every day I feel so blessed to work in higher education and work with such outstanding students who I am confident are going to go and help us to create a better world. So my background is in academic advising. I was a graduate advisor. I was a full-time undergraduate advisor at the University of Illinois for 5 years before moving on to the medical school and being an advising administrator there. And now I'm a faculty advisor. So I've kind of done advising from every perspective. And Terry O'Banion said this back in 1972, kind of about what is advising. And I think it's increasingly important for us to be able to define what advising is. And what he said was, hey, you might be thinking that advising is about scheduling courses, but actually advisors do a lot more than schedule classes. In fact, to be able to schedule the correct courses, you got to know a lot about students. You need to know what their life goals are, what their career goals are before we start talking about majors and courses, and whether you're going to take it at 9 o'clock or how many online classes are you going to be taking this semester. So it's really what I have found is that it's in building the relationships with students that I think is the most fulfilling part of academic advising, and I would argue probably the most important part of advising, especially as we're moving in, many of us are moving to these more virtual formats. I think our students need to feel that they belong, and we are going to play a really important role in helping students feel connected to the institution, and hopefully we can also help them connect to each other and the resources available. This is a quote from me. I always find it a little self-indulgent to quote myself, but frankly, not many people talk about this. And I say, high impact advisors realize that the positive outcomes of advising sessions aren't just limited to students. In fact, the real joy of advising occurs when advisors understand how fulfilling it is to impact other people's lives and how much we can learn from our students. Your students are amazing. My students are amazing. But we don't really know that until we get to know them and get to know their stories. And I'm always inspired by my student stories. So what is appreciative advising? This comes out of an organizational development theory called Appreciative Inquiry. And in 2002, I co-authored an article with Nancy Martin in The Mentor, the online advising journal at Penn State, that was titled Incorporating Appreciative Inquiry into Academic Advising. And that has subsequently just taken on a life of its own. And so appreciative advising is the intentional collaborative practice of asking generative, open-ended questions that help students optimize their educational experiences and achieve their dreams, goals, and potentials. So it's not just barely skating through an undergraduate or a graduate school experience. I really want people to make the most of those experiences, and I feel like advisors are really well positioned to help students make the most of their experiences. One of the things that we've been working on for the last several years, in particular since 2018, we totally overhauled everything we were doing in the Appreciative Advising Institute to make it more social justice focused. And my colleagues Heather Doyle and Annie Kelly have been taking kind of a lead role in moving forward this critical approach to appreciative advising. And I think, of course, this is more important now than ever. So what we're really looking at through this critical appreciative advising approach is that it's a process where we continually reflect on our own biases, assumptions, and worldviews, and how those worldviews and biases affect our relationships with students. And then it also, one of the big powers of appreciative advising has always been the power of stories, this power of student stories. So understanding that the value of the advising relationship is found in and within these student stories and our students' lived experiences. And then by being more reflective of our own identities as advisors, as well as those of our students, we're able to work with others in a more intentional, thoughtful, and impactful way. So this appreciative approach started in advising, but now is being used throughout higher education institutions, and everything from career services to student conduct to teaching to development work, etc. And I think the reason is that at its heart, this framework is a framework for building good relationships with other people based on trust. And there are a number of institutions that many offices within the institution have adopted this appreciative advising approach. Collin College there, I saw that we had someone from Collin in the audience. Tarrant County College, also in the great state of Texas, but Hong Kong Polytechnic, this has really spanned the globe. And I even hesitate to put this slide up anymore because there was a time many years ago when I knew all of the places that were using appreciative advising. This is just a small sample of some of the institutions that are using this approach. And ultimately, you got to ask this question, does appreciative advising work? And the answer is yes. And one of the exciting things over the years is how the research literature has grown. We do have a Journal of Appreciative Education. The NACADA Journal last summer had, I think, 3 different articles that focused on appreciative advising. But I'm going to just kind of show you, I've only got a limited amount of time, but I'm just going to highlight here the study that kind of really launched us, and that was at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. I met my co-author Bryant Hudson in 2005 at a NACADA conference, and he came up to me and said, "Hey Jenny, I've read your article, I've been to your presentations, I want to let you know that we're doing this at UNCG." And I was like, "Oh, cool." And he's like, "Yeah, even better, we've got some data that shows that it has an impact." I'm like, "Oh, tell me more." So they were using it in their student academic services office, and it was going really well. But they were having an issue with students who had been dismissed from the institution. So at UNCG, If you get dropped from the institution for not performing well in the classroom, you had to sit out at least a year, and then you could submit a petition and, you know, say, I promise I'm not going to make the same mistakes. And people were coming back, and yet they were really struggling when they came back. So they said, let's set up a pilot project where we allow students who have been dismissed from the institution to meet with an appreciative advisor 3 times the semester that they return off of suspension. And what happened? Well, 90% of those who met with the appreciative advisor were eligible to continue the following semester after they returned, versus 33% of those who did not. And the GPA that semester when they returned was a 2.86 versus a 1.29 for people who didn't do that. And so based on that data, they were able to go to the faculty senate at UNCG and change the policy so that everyone who is coming off of suspension now meets with an appreciative advisor 3 times the semester that they return. There's also a study done by Nancy Howell. There's another one that was done at the community college level on the impact on advisors of adopting this approach. Because you can't change other people's behavior, you can only change your own behavior. So when you start paying attention to your verbal, nonverbal behaviors, the questions that you're asking, it can not only improve your relationships with students, but also with people outside of work. So what Nancy found when she went around the country and talked to people at 4-year institutions who had adopted the appreciative advising approach was that they felt better able to use their own strengths, skills, and abilities. They felt more effective in their jobs. They felt like they were able to build better relationships with students. And they also felt that they were able to build better relationships with their kids and with their spouse and other people in their lives. So there are 6 phases to appreciative advising, and I'm going to go through them quickly. It's a theory to practice framework, friends. This is not something that you are going to necessarily go through all 6 phases every time you meet with someone. It's a framework. You get the opportunity to make it your own. I will also address right now the other concern people have. It's like, oh my gosh, I only have 30-minute appointments with students. I don't have time to go through 6 phases. And actually, you know, this framework can easily be done within 30 minutes in most cases. And many people are doing it in 20 to 25 minutes. And I'll tell you why. I think the value is in the questions that you're asking, and you can learn a lot about somebody in a very short amount of time if you're asking good questions. So we'll go through this. The disarm phase only takes a minute. It's about being intentional about how you are greeting people. You're intentional about how your office is decorated. You really want to create this safe, warm, welcoming environment for students. The discover phase, if you're asking a good generative question, and I'll share some questions a little bit later, this is when we're going to use good, positive, open-ended questions to learn about our students. We're going to learn about who they are, what their strengths are, and what their passions are. From there, we go into the dream phase, and it's what it sounds like. What are their hopes and dreams for the future? Once we know those hopes and dreams, then we're going to work with students. We're going to partner with students to co-create a plan to achieve those goals. And then deliver is when the student goes out and delivers on that plan, knowing full well that just like us, we are perfectly imperfect. Our students are perfectly imperfect, and they're going to make mistakes. And we're going to be there to help them learn from those mistakes and to move forward. And the last phase is the don't settle phase. And this was when the advisor challenges students and themselves, by the way, to proactively raise their own internal bar of self-expectations. This is not about lowering expectations for students. Vincent Tinto, the retention researcher, says people don't rise to low expectations, they rise to high expectations. It's about having high expectations for our students and for ourselves, but also providing the support that students need to meet those high expectations. And then underneath this framework is what we call the appreciative mindset. And the appreciative mindset in summary is, I always say, if you're looking for the worst in people, you'll find the worst. Conversely, though, if you're looking for the best in people, you can find the best in people. But we do have this negativity bias that's kind of baked into us as human beings. So it's easier to say than to do. We're really good at judging other people and finding faults in them. And we're not always as good in terms of looking for the best in others. So there are 6 tenets to the appreciative mindset. One is caring about and believing in the potential of each student that walks through our doors or that we see on Zoom. Possessing an attitude of gratefulness. Continually working to hone our craft. There's no day when I wake up and say, you know what, I'm pretty much the best advisor on the planet. Far from it. I have so much to learn. I'm reading, I'm trying to get better all the time. And that is crucial because obviously the world is changing. Our students, their experiences are changing just so rapidly right now that we need to be ready to innovate every day. Remembering the power that we have as advisors. I know it can seem like we don't have power, but we do. Students really really look up to us. And so we need to make sure that we're using our power for good and not for evil. And then being insatiably curious about our students' stories. The key to the discover phase is not just the questions that we're asking, but students can tell whether you really are wanting to hear their story or not. If you're just going through the motions, they aren't gonna engage with us. We really have to live out this insatiable curiosity that Chip and Dan Heath talk about. And then being culturally aware and responsive. We're in our office, we're working hard to with our team of interns to educate ourselves and our team about being an anti-racist. And so this is Ibram Kendi's book, it's been on the bestseller list the last several weeks. And he says, what's the problem with being not racist? It's a claim that signifies neutrality. I'm not a racist, but neither am I aggressively against racism. But there is no neutrality in the racism struggle. The opposite of racist isn't not racist, it's anti-racist. What's the difference? One endorses either the idea of a racial hierarchy as a racist or racial equality as an anti-racist. One either believes problems are rooted in groups of people as a racist or locates the roots of problems in power and policies as an anti-racist. And I think, what we're committed to is to being anti-racist, and I hope you all will join us in that work because it's really important and necessary. At the heart of it, what we have in common is that, again, that we're human. We're perfectly imperfect human beings, and so are our students. And so, we've all been through a lot. And so having grace with each other, having grace with our students, having grace with ourselves during these trying times is very important. So the disarm phase is this is a theory to practice framework. And so now I'm gonna kind of go into like specific things that you can do to live out each of these phases. This goes from the pre-appointment, everything to what's on your website about you, to, the seating in your office, but I want to really focus in on where we're at right now. Right now, we're doing this online. We're either doing it on Zoom or doing phone calls. And so, what's the background behind you? Being intentional about that. Tone of voice, your engagement, not being distracted, looking at your phone, all those things are important in this new adventure that we're in. And then I think we really got to think more about, where are our students going to be this fall? And frankly, many of us don't know where they're going to be. We don't know if we're going to be in person on campus or we're going to be online or a combination thereof. I showed this picture because at FAU a few years ago, our University Advising Services office was realizing that they were missing out on an important population of students, and that is, we're a commuter campus. We have a lot of commuter students, and they just weren't coming into the advising office, even though there were night office hours, etc. And so one of the advisors said, let's meet students where they're at. And somebody else said, yeah, where are they at? And our campus, they're in the parking garage. And so Joe Murray, the assistant dean in charge of university advising services, was able to secure the kind of the old payment booth in the garage and set up an office. And so, you know, 1 or 2 nights a week, they have office hours in the parking garage. And obviously they weren't in the office, they were outside in this picture. But I bring that up because I think we're all going to need to be especially creative this fall as we start to learn where our students are at or where they're not. And maybe some of the strategies we've been using in the past to get students into our offices aren't going to work. And so this, to me, that's exciting because it's an opportunity for us to be creative. So let's talk a little bit about immediacy behaviors. This comes out of the teacher education literature. And, you know, this is the principle. People are drawn towards people and things that they like, duh, or evaluate highly, duh. And they move away from things that they don't like. I really like my job. You know, if we don't have students, we don't have jobs. We're seeing right now in the wake of the pandemic that many institutions are making cuts. I want to continue to work in my job. And so I'm really happy to see students. I think we've just got to be aware that we are in some really precarious times in terms of the financial stability of higher education institutions. And so when students are reaching out to us, yay, thank goodness. That means job security for us. Disarms, you know, I think this is on a daily basis, just with our coworkers. You know, it always used to drive me crazy if I walked into an office and everybody just keeps working and doesn't look up and say, hello, good morning, how's it going? These little things make a difference. Names are important. What you prefer to be called, letting students know what you prefer to be called. I prefer to be called Jenny. So I say, hi, my name is Jenny. I'm so glad that you're here. Come on in. If I prefer to be called Dr. Bloom, that's fine. I just would say, hi, I'm Dr. Bloom. But different people have different preferences. And so establishing that right up front is important. And also, we need to know what our students prefer to be called. Sometimes that information is in our student database, their preferred name. Sometimes it's not. We need to establish that right up front, what students prefer to be called. Listening is key to this entire appreciative advising framework. Parker Palmer said, undivided attention means forgetting about yourself and acting as if you had no other purpose on earth than to care for this human being right in front of you. And so this symbol here in Chinese is, you know, it's, when we're talking about really listening, it's not just with our ears, it's with our eyes, it's giving undivided attention, it's listening with our heart and our mind. Being present. I think cell phones are a challenge even in this online environment. If you can see that somebody's looking down at their cell phone while they're talking to you, it can be really distracting. Also, you know, we're in Zoom meetings and people put up their name screen instead of being engaged. And I feel like now more than ever, one thing that we're all realizing in this pandemic is that we really need each other and we need that human touch. So question, how many times a day does the average person unlock their phone? Ow, 80. It's 80. But how many times do they touch their phone? this is a different question because you can unlock it and you can stay on it for a couple of hours, right? So it's not as many. This number was pretty startling to me. 2,617 times a day. What does that translate to? 163 times per waking hour. We are on our phones. And again, I just feel like people now more than ever need us to be fully present. So, all right, so disarm only takes a minute. Now we're heading into the discover phase. And this is, for me, a really fun phase where we get to know our students and their stories. And so that listening thing is really important. And these are some of the definitions of discover. And for me, I like the one in the upper right, to identify a person as a potentially prominent performer. I am so blessed that I have had a number of people throughout my career who saw potential in me at times when I frankly thought I had zero potential. But because someone else saw potential in me and thought I could do something, I actually did it, and I learned and I grew and I got better. And I feel like my whole career has been spent trying to pay that forward, to see the potential in each and every individual that I'm interacting with is such an important thing to do. And it's probably the greatest gift that I've received in my life. Discover, I'm going to share some questions with you that you can use to get to know students. But again, it's not the words. It's that we have to be authentic and really wanting to hear our students' stories. And, you know, frankly, students have a really good BS monitor. I mean, in other words, if they just think you're going through the motions, they are not going to engage with us. So you got to be fearlessly authentic. The other thing is these questions I'm going to share with you, they aren't necessarily used to being asked. And so it's just like when you teach on the first day of class, you say, anybody have any questions? And of course you get dead silence. And if you don't wait for it, you know, and somebody finally is going to speak up, you're going to be answering your own questions the entire time. So when you ask the question, you got to give people just a little bit of time to be able to think about the answer and to share it with you. We've talked about the importance of diversity. This is, I think, the discover phase is a really important thing because it allows you to learn everyone has their own unique story, and these discover questions allow you to get at that. And again, how you're listening, I find Tara Yasso's community cultural wealth model to be a really important framework to be thinking about as I'm listening to students and their stories, because our students we want to take an assets-based approach to working with students, and they have all kinds of capital that we need to be listening for. So they have family capital, they have social capital, they can have navigational capital, resistance capital, right? This has become an important thing. Linguistic capital, cultural capital, and then aspirational capital. And each student brings a unique mosaic of these assets to the table. And we really want to listen for these pieces of capital that they have, and so that we can kind of reflect that back to our students as we're listening to them. The other thing that's important in the discover phase is to be willing to share our own story as appropriate and not for 30 minutes, right? So if you're meeting with a student who's on probation after their first semester, and you were on probation after your first semester of college, boy, that's a really great time to share that story, because it can feel really lonely when you're on probation. I always say most people, I think that they're the only people on campus who are on probation at any given time. And if you share that story of your own experiences, it just makes it feel better, and you represent hope because you obviously have become successful. So, but I'm going to go back and say, if you weren't on probation after your first semester, don't lie and say that you were on probation after your first semester. That's where that being fearlessly authentic is really important. So what are some discover questions? You know, tell me about a time that you had a positive impact on somebody else's life. Tell me what you enjoy most about being an advisor, or if you're dealing with a student, you know, tell me about a time that, you know, best captures your experience as an undergraduate or a graduate student at this institution. So from discover, we go into dream. We've learned a little bit about our student, and now we're heading into the dream phase, where we're going to inquire about their hopes and dreams for the future. And why is that important? You know, this is from John Maxwell. He says, a dream is an inspiring picture of the future that energizes your mind, will, and emotions, empowering you to do everything you can to achieve it. So here during the dream phase, as we're listening to students and about their hopes and dreams for the future, we're also kind of keeping in mind what we learned about them during the discover phase, to make sure that there's congruency between where they seem to really light up and talk about what they love to do in the past, and kind of where they're going in the future. I want to go back to Yasso's aspirational capital, right? Aspirational capital is the ability to maintain hopes and dreams for the future, even in the face of barriers. And our students are experiencing a lot of barriers to education. And so keep helping them to just keep in mind that their dreams are powerful. Their dreams are worthy of you know, figuring out ways to deal with those barriers that are coming. And also this is also an important reminder for us to let them know that when they run into those barriers, to come back to talk to us. That's why we're here, is to help them. The words that we use in the dream phase are important. Some people talk about having a backup plan. I prefer to talk to students about having a parallel plan. I think when, you know, somebody says, hey, I want to become a doctor, and they were on probation after their first semester, it's easy to say, ooh, what's your backup plan? But we can talk about parallel plans, about having choices, about having options. You know, I always say, I don't know what I'm going to do 5 years from now. I don't know if I'm going to continue as a faculty member, go back to be an administrator, be a full-time consultant. I don't know, but I'm really trying to set myself up so that I have lots of options. Options are good. So what are some examples of dream phase questions? When you were 8 years old and your aunt asked you, what do you want to be when you grow up? How did you answer? And people usually chuckle. And then how do you answer when people ask you that now? If salary, education, and time were irrelevant, you could be anything that you want to be. What would your ideal job look like? And if you keep getting, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, the magazine question is a powerful question. And that is, it's 5 years from now, you're on the cover of a magazine. What magazine is it? Why are you on the cover? There's a lot of pressure on young people today to be able to articulate what they're going to do for the rest of their lives. And so sometimes we just need to kind of like break that tension by asking a little bit different question. This is from the University of Central Florida. This is one way that you can kind of live out the dream phase as an office. In their first year advising office, they have a wall of dreams, and while people are waiting to meet with their advisor, they just have these little strips of paper, and people can you know, write down their hopes for the future. You know, work for Pixar, go to medical school, to be on a stamp. I love that. To be happy. And it's, they've got to take this down like almost every day, because sometimes I think people think that students don't have dreams or don't want to dream. They have dreams, and it's very affirming for them to see that other people have dreams too, and some of them are similar to their own. Here at Florida Atlantic University, the right picture is from our University Advising Services office. They've got basically whiteboards that have clouds on them where students write down their dreams, and then they record, they take pictures of that each night, and same kind of thing. And then to the left, our transfer orientation a couple years ago was using, they were having students, they were taking them through the 6 phases of appreciative advising during orientation, and they collected dreams and put them up in the orientation office. So once we know what the students' hopes and dreams are for the future, then we move into the design phase. And the design phase is where we help co-create a plan to achieve those dreams and goals. Here, I want to talk about mattering. This is from Schlossberg, Lynch, and Chickering. And so the creation of environments that clearly indicate to all students that they matter will urge them to greater involvement. Clearly, institutions that focus on mattering and greater student involvement will be more successful in creating campuses where students are motivated to learn, where their retention is high, and ultimately where their institutional loyalty for the short and long-term future is ensured. You know, this involvement of students is crucial to this design phase. It's not me, the expert, telling you, little person, what you need to do, right? Like, we're gonna come together and create this plan together. And I can't kind of emphasize that enough, that, you know, people are gonna have a greater sense of involvement in making that plan happen if they've been a part of the creation of the plan. And it takes a village. It takes a village now more than ever. And we talk about this personal board of directors. And this is an important concept, I think, to share with students, because I know for me, when I was in my 20s, if somebody had asked, if you had asked me, you know, do you have a mentor? I would have told you no. And I had mentors, but at that time I thought a mentor was like the be-all mentor that could mentor me on my personal life, my professional life, my career, everything. And the reality is that we go to different people for different things. And so just like a corporation has a board of directors where they're intentional about getting a supply chain expert, a marketing expert, an accounting person, they're really intentional about who's on their board, that each of us needs to have our own personal board of directors that we can go to when we need assistance. And needing assistance is not a sign of weakness, right? This is, we know how important it is to be able to galvanize the power of our network of people. In the design phase, we want to make sure that we don't overwhelm students. I don't know about you, but when my to-do list gets really long, it gets overwhelming, and I'm like, oh my God, there's no way I'm going to be able to get all this stuff done. We want to help students prioritize what the most important thing is on the list that we come up with together, and get some positive momentum built up, and not have them just be like, I'm frozen. I can't do anything because I'm overwhelmed. We can also help students set deadlines for accomplishing things. And in an ideal world, the student gets to have the voice in terms of what the deadline is. But as we know, in our institutions, there are just some deadlines. There are add-drop deadlines, etc., that we will need to let students know about. But whenever possible, when we can kind of co-create or have the student create the deadlines, that's even better. Effective referrals. It does take a village to graduate a student. We have a lot of resources on our campuses. Students are busy. And if we just say you should go to the financial aid office, that's nice, but people aren't necessarily going to do that. And so instead, if we say, hey, I hear what you're saying, you're having a problem with your Pell Grant. I want you to go see my friend Patricia over in the financial aid office. She's awesome. She's helped a number of our students. And why don't we sit and kind of brainstorm on some questions that you might be able to ask when you go to the financial aid office. That is like pre-disarming for the financial aid officer. So making those personalized referrals. I think the other place that we're going to increasingly need to refer students to is to counseling. We know that mental health issues, anxiety, depression, suicide have been increasing over the last several years. We know that this pandemic, as well as some of the racial injustice issues that our students have been dealing with, this has taken a toll on all of us. And so we're going to need to be especially on the lookout for opportunities to help our students get access to the counseling center and the help that they need, because this is tough. What we're dealing with is a pandemic that we haven't seen the likes of for over 100 years. So yeah, the counseling center is an important place. Design questions: what can you do in the next week to move one step closer to accomplishing one of your goals? Let's brainstorm on the resources you're going to need to accomplish your goals. In the deliver phase, this is when the student goes out and delivers on the plan. And again, I'm going to reiterate that students, just like us, we are all perfectly imperfect and we make mistakes. And how can we recover from those mistakes and move forward quickly? So this is typically towards the end of an appointment where we'll review what we've talked about. I generally take notes during my advising sessions. I have to tell students before we start the session that I'm going to take notes, and then I'm going to give them a copy of the notes at the end, or otherwise they assume I'm writing these terrible things about them. So we're going to go over what we talked about. I'm going to reiterate that I'm here, right? That keep calm, contact me if you run into problems. You're going to run into problems. Life is full of challenges, and I want you to know that I'm here. I'm always telling myself this, that Jenny Bloom, you've got to care out loud. You know, it's not just what we say, it's what we do. And what does caring out loud mean in this, in an online environment? And I'm still working to figure out what that looks like. I've been having bi-weekly check-ins with my students, my master's degree students. We've been meeting all summer, which is not something that we did before. It's optional, but I'm just making sure that people know that I really care about them. And again, you have to walk that talk. It's both. This encouragement piece is more important than ever. You know, Noel Tichy's at Michigan, and he says, simply put, a leader's job is to energize others. Notice I don't say it's part of your job, it is your job. There is no time off when a leader isn't responsible for energizing others. Every interaction we have with someone else is either going to positively energize or it's going to negatively energize them. There's enough negative energy. You know, we need to bring that positive energy to our interactions with students. Kind of ending the conversation with a student. Do you have any questions for me? Is there anything I should have asked you? I've really enjoyed talking with you. Thank you so much for coming to see me. Again, if we don't have students, we don't have jobs. Thank you for coming to see me. So deliver phase questions. What are you going to do if you run into roadblocks? You probably are going to run into some roadblocks, you know, and then reminding them, for example, come see me. That's why I'm here. I'm here to help. How and when are you going to keep me updated on your progress? Because I care. I want to hear how it goes when you go to the financial aid office. And what will you do if you think your goals may be changing? Come back. Come see me. We'll come up with a new plan. No problem. The last phase is the don't settle phase. My friend John Wright says that our job as leaders is to help people become better than what they think that they can become. And so if you look up settle in the dictionary, you're going to see this: to move downward, sink, or descend, especially gradually. Not, you know, we want to catch students early. This is what early warning programs are trying to do, is to get students in early. I think this is going to be more important than ever this fall. We want to raise the bar of expectations, again, for ourselves and for our students. Jim Collins, in his best-selling book, Good to Great, starts out with this sentence. He says, good is the enemy of great. He says, we don't have great schools principally because we have good schools. Few people attain great lives, in large part because it's so darn easy to settle for a good life. I love this term from George Koo. Positive restlessness means we're doing good things and we can do better, right? We can always do better. And sometimes people will say, hey, Jenny, I take good care of students in my office, but when I send them across the hall or to this other office, they're actually kind of rude to them. Jim Collins would say, don't worry about them. Create a pocket of greatness in your office. Focus on what you have control over and take the best care of students that you can, because this spreads on campuses. So these are the 6 phases of appreciative advising: disarm, discover, dream, design, deliver, and don't settle. And I'm gonna end on this quote from Nancy Twiss, who was a scholarship advisor at Kansas State University. And she said, most of us will not find answers to the causes of cancer or solve the problems of homelessness or diffuse international conflicts. But we feel that through our advising, we may be able to make a small but pivotal contribution to our students' ultimate work. It seems to me that our students represent an unequivocal reply to Margaret Mead when she famously said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed people can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So, with that, I'm going to open it up to questions and answers, but I would love if people in the chat might be able to reflect on and share one takeaway item or action item from the presentation today that you would love to be able to go back and be more intentional about using in your work with students. And with that, Brandon, I'm gonna throw it over to you to if there's any questions, because I don't see them.
We have a few, but I think one of the main questions that everyone was asking or want to know is if they can have a copy of the presentation.
Absolutely, Brandon. I will send you the slides, and then you can feel free to distribute the slides however that works best for you, either on your website or just via email. However, that's fine.
No problem. So if everyone would like the TEXAAN page, and if you are interested in the slides, please write the page, or I think it's like the page or join, and we will get those slides to you as soon as possible. We have
yeah, I see some of the questions. I really would love to start with this one, Brandon, if we could, which is, what are best practices for advisors who are mentally tired, drained, overworked from all that's going on, but want to deliver appreciative advising? Whew. Yeah. It's a really good question. I think that it's more important than ever that we take good care of ourselves, my friends. What I have found is that advisors are such wonderful human beings that they're always trying to be of service to others. And I've learned this the hard way, unfortunately, that if you're not taking care of yourself first, you just, at some point, you're gonna crash and burn. And there's lots of reasons to be tired and to have lots of things happening. I am absolutely I'm not perfect on this. This is something that I've had to really focus on. I will tell you, for me, probably the most important thing that I did was back in 2005. I was tired all the time. And then I got tired of being tired. Does anybody know what that feels like? And I was like, I gotta do something different here. And I started walking, and I started keeping track of my steps, because at that time we were talking about doing 10,000 steps. And I thought, oh yeah, I probably do 10,000 steps a day. And the reality was, when I put on the pedometer, I was doing about 2,000 steps a day. And so in 2006, I made the commitment I was going to take 10,000 steps, which is about 5 miles every day. And I did that every day in 2006. And then after 2006, I started to take an occasional day off. And the day that I was taking off was when I was at South Carolina. I taught all day on Wednesdays. I had a 3-hour class morning, 3-hour class afternoon, 3-hour class in the evening. And of course, what day was I feeling the worst was on Wednesdays. And so It's now been over, I think it's 8 years that I have been taking 10,000 steps every day. I have not missed a day. It's the very first thing I do in the morning is get up. And now over time, I've ramped up to running, and now I'm running 5 miles a day. I haven't missed a day in this pandemic. And I think that has been a key to my own mental and physical health during this time. And it's not being selfish that I spend the first hour of the day doing that. And it's really important. So, you know, what I've learned, because I read a lot about this, is that we got to get 8 hours of sleep. We need to be drinking lots of water. We need to be moving. All these basic things that we know, I know I wasn't living them out. And since I've done that, it makes a huge difference. So anyway, that's my answer to that one, Brandon. I'll let you ask the questions from there.
No problem at all. Any particular tools that you or others have found students really use and appreciate when it comes to deadlines and time management?
Yeah, I think the thing that I have found helpful is 2 things. One is, as much as possible, allowing students to set their own deadlines when it's appropriate. Again, it's not always appropriate. Number 2 is the follow-up. Like, if I know, for example, if Brandon and I are writing an article together and I've told Brandon that I'm going to get him something by next Friday, if it's Friday and Brandon hasn't heard from me, you know, having that accountability, or if he emails me his part that he wrote on Thursday, I'm like, oh gosh, I have got to get this to him. So having an accountability partner, and I think we can be accountability partners for students in some cases, is also a helpful thing.
Absolutely. This is a good one. Hold on, where did it go? It was in the chat. Second. How can one be fearlessly authentic and also maintain adequate professional distance? This is something I struggle with quite a bit.
That's a really good question. I'm going to stop sharing this. That has changed for me over the course of my career. When I was young, when I was started working at the medical school when I was 28. I had just come off my doctorate, and I was running an MD, or not running, but I was the admissions person for the MD PhD program. We had 175 MD PhD students. Probably about half of them were older than I was. And so I found that I had to figure out what my boundaries were. And that is less of an issue for me now at 53. When I was the same age as the students, or younger, of the students I was interacting with, that was a challenge because I really liked them. But then I had to learn that there was a time and a place for me to interact with them, and there were things that were appropriate to do with them socially, and things that were not. And I think we've all got to figure out those boundaries for ourselves, because I think it depends on you and the situation that you're in. I will tell you that, you know, what I'm reading about polarities right now, right? And a polarity means things like having candor with people is on one pole, and then let me just pull this out here real quick. So candor and diplomacy, for example, can be on 2 different poles. And I think it's easy to take this one to their extremes, right? How can we build healthy, appropriate relationships with students and maintain the professional boundaries? And I think it's an and, it's not an either or. And I think you've got to be yourself, and you've got to know your students and figure out what that is for you.
Absolutely. Diana, how do you engage a student during the dream and discover phases when they may not feel willing to share.
Yeah, and for me, that's where the framework comes in handy, because if they're not willing to share, it's that sometimes happens in the dream phase. And that means I haven't gained their trust yet. And so I got to go back to disarm and to discover and get to know them a little bit more, and really show that I'm interested and I'm asking good follow-up questions, which also buys them a little bit more time to think about their hopes and dreams for the future. And so that for me is a trigger that I haven't yet established the rapport that I was hoping. And you know what? Sometimes it takes a little bit of time, right? Sometimes they don't feel comfortable on the first time coming in to meet with you, especially when you're new. And over time, I think the advantage of being someplace over time is that word of mouth gets out, and people know that, oh yeah, no, go see Jenny. She'll take really good care of you. You can totally trust her. But I didn't have that when I first started here or at South Carolina, and I had to earn that trust. And so if you're early on someplace, just know that that's like, we got to earn the trust. And sometimes that takes time.
Absolutely. Do you think there is space for appreciative advising in K-12 college advising?
Yes, thank you so much for asking that. You just made my day in asking that. You know, my mom was a 6th grade teacher. My aunt was a high school principal. From the beginning in this, when I established the Office of Appreciative Education at University of South Carolina, when I was there, I said, this is a framework that works in K through 12 and in higher ed. And 2 years ago, I had the honor of teaching a class for Broward County public school administrators on appreciative administration. We have an appreciative administration online class, but teaching people how to use this framework within leadership positions. And it was the best experience, because these principals could immediately see how the framework was adaptable and usable in the K through 12 setting. In fact, one of my students yesterday had invited me to come and present to her intern principals via Zoom about this appreciative approach to running a school. So if you would, please feel free to reach out to me at jennybloom14@gmail.com if you want to talk some more about the K through 12. There's a number of really cool resources. Appreciative inquiries being used by a number of K through 12 school districts. And also yesterday, I had a really interesting discussion with a local city that is very involved. Their vice mayor was on the phone call with their school district, and we're going to be doing what's called an Appreciative Inquiry Summit. That's going to bring together the school district, parents, the greater community to figure out what is going to be the new normal for this particular school district. So lots and lots of ways that this is already being applied in K through 12 settings, and I'd love to chat with you some more.
Okay, so a statement and a question. Keelan Morgan.
Yes.
Dr. Bloom, on behalf of the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, thank you for sharing this critical information. In the midst of the pandemic, we are experiencing the tenets of appreciative advising are timely and very important to the success of the students. Absolutely. How do you assess impact and effectiveness of this approach?
Yeah, so there's, assessment needs to be multifaceted. Brandon, I will send you an article to forward out that my co-authors Bryant and Jane wrote about taking an appreciative approach to assessing academic advising. And so they lay out in this article that was in the review of higher education, how to take an appreciative approach to assessment. Okay. And it has to be multifaceted. We're working on a number of different instruments right now. And again, if you feel free to reach out to me, and I'd be happy to share some of that. But I think this appreciative assessment article you'll really enjoy reading. and we'll hopefully stimulate some thoughts about how to go about doing that.
Okay. Next question. Let me go to any advice for someone who is beginning a PhD? We could have a whole conversation. Sleep, buy a lot of coffee, and yeah. No, go ahead, Dr. Plume.
So what was the question?
Any advice for someone who is beginning a PhD?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah, we could do that all day, couldn't we, Brandon? In fact, I have a whole presentation on that. Brandon and I were just talking earlier before we came on, because he's working on his doctorate. A doctorate, in my mind, and I have an EDD, and that's what he's working on, is a degree, I think, in persistence. You can do it. That's the first thing I want to say. If I can do it, trust me, anyone can do this. It's a degree in persistence. What I would really encourage you to do, if you're thinking about pursuing a doctorate, is to start paying attention to what you're just naturally going to and reading more about. You know, when you read, if you're reading an article, if it's a newspaper article, if it's a research article, and you find yourself in the research article going to look at the reference list to find out more about, you know, a sentence that was in there, that's a really good indicator that that's a topic that is really compelling to you. Follow it. The other thing is, I've started a long time ago a document where I just kept track of quotes that spoke to me. And that was really the only criteria, just something that really, like, oh yeah, I really like that. And I started putting them into a document. I'll tell you, it's, you know, I think it's 100 pages long at this point. And there's rarely a time when I give a presentation that I don't start with that document. And really, it's probably one of my most personal documents, because if you read that, you will see much of what I just kind of presented reflected in that. Like, we are what we read. And my colleague, Dr. Salinas, what he always tells prospective PhD students and PhD students is read, 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 right? Like, you can't read enough. So read, but read things that you find really compelling at this point.
Absolutely. And try your best to find tools that you can use to lighten the load, because reading and trying to remember every article and where it came from can be taxing. So there are several Facebook pages, several tools that you can use to help you in your doctoral journey. And I can share those with you as well if you're interested. Could you share more about the critical piece in critical appreciative advising? What strategies and practices can advisors engage in to enhance their critical approach?
Yeah, you know, like I say, 2 years ago, we totally overhauled our Appreciative Advising Institute to infuse social justice and a critical approach into everything that we were doing at the Institute. And what we're doing, and if you're interested in being part of this conversation, is that we've got a group of people that have been meeting to really think through what this looks like. And I think the addition of the anti-racist piece, you know, Dr. Kendi's work and others' work is strengthening. But what we really want to do is to lay out in an article or a book, like what does this look like, right? What does it look like, not just in theory, but in practice? And I think the strength of appreciative advising is that it is theory to practice, and it has practical tools for implementing each of the phases and setting out what those, both on the theoretical end as well as the putting it into practice end, what does that look like, and accumulating stories of how people are implementing this from an anti-racist or a critical approach is what we're kind of in the process of compiling right now. So again, if you're interested in, you know, partaking in and participating in those conversations, to me, it's a really exciting thing that we've embarked upon and are going to be continuing to, you know, do an even deeper dive as we move forward.
How do you provide a student encouragement when they have much negativity or expectation of failure from their family?
Mm-hmm. That happens to a lot of our students, right? And not to all of them. You know, it's what's challenging about that is, as you know, every student is different. Every situation is different. You know, for example, is the student living at home? Is it a safe place for them to be? You know, because I think it takes, I've been doing this long enough to know that every situation is unique. And so I don't want to like pretend that there's some magic answer to that question, because it's so nuanced, as you know. It's just it really depends on the student's situation, and it depends on the, again, the damage that has been inflicted upon the student and what level that is at. For example, I'm not a trained counselor, and if it's, so I think part of it's knowing what I can do and when it's appropriate for me to refer to the appropriate professional on campus. And yeah, so I hate to give a non-answer, but for me, it feels like an authentic answer, but I wish I could say, here's the magic approach to it. But I think that's where listening carefully and knowing what our own limitations are as advisors is really important, and being aware of what those resources are on campuses and getting the students to those resources so that the people who are trained to really help them work through some of those issues, we get them to there. Because I'm, you know, just to say, go to the counseling center. Most people aren't going to just go to the counseling center. There's a stigma in many communities around going to see a counselor. So it's complex.
Absolutely. And with that, I'm gonna follow up with this question. Inspirational presentation, thank you. Here's a challenge to you. You
Yes.
emphasize the responsibilities of the advisor. What about the responsibilities of the advisee? For example, advisees need to assume responsibility for knowing where basic information is, for example, departmental website, PDF explaining how to use the online degree planning platform, etc. How do you respond to an advisee who refuses to assume such responsibility, who expects you to be an information valet for most basic information sources that the student has refused to consult? What about the student as customer phenomenon, which encourages students to demand services from you without assuming the responsibilities of being a student? That's a lot.
That's a lot. That's a lot. That's a lot in there. I will say, one of the things that we've got to be careful about over time as we work at a higher education institution is what Chip and Dan Heath call the curse of knowledge. These things that we think are just common sense, that we know how to go into the website, we know how to do these things, and we just assume that others, I mean, just the terminology, my God, we have so many acronyms. We have some really highfalutin words, for lack of a better term, that we just kind of throw around, and people don't know what they mean. And nobody wants to appear stupid in front of us. And so oftentimes students aren't going to ask, what do you mean when you say this? And so my approach, I totally agree with you that we need, that students, this is a two-way street, right? That students have responsibilities and it's their degree. I get that. And I will also say that I try to take a teaching approach in those kinds of situations. So in other words, if it's like, it's a policy that's on the website, and, you know, to have the student pull up with me I just want to show you here how I'm getting to the student handbooks. Things we assume people know, that they know how to go access the student handbook, for example. They don't necessarily know that. And so I'm going to walk the student through, show them on my screen what I'm talking about, how to do a search. The beauty of Google, even though students are digital natives, in many ways, I still am amazed how, if I don't know something, I just go to Google. We need to teach students that all you have to do is go to FAU, like I'll go to Google and I'll say, FAU, what's the policy around late drops? And it will magically come up. What I fear is that sometimes when we're talking to students in those kinds of situations, that it's easy to come across as if we're talking down to a student. Personally, I hate when people talk down to me. I hate it. Like I'm not 2 years old. And so I really try not to talk down to people. And I will also say though, that if I'm showing the student how to do this once, and maybe they're coming back in a few weeks and it's another issue and I'm maybe gonna walk them through again, or the next time what I'm gonna do is say, all right, last time you were here, I kind of walked you through it. I'm gonna let you drive on this computer and I want you to show me how you would approach getting this information. Because then when I see what they're doing, how they're going to a certain website and it doesn't have the right information, it's like, okay, so I'm just gonna suggest, what if we just go to Google and just do FAU, whatever the thing is, that is it. So again, nuanced, every situation is different. I think the person who wrote that in is thinking of someone in particular. But let me assure you that what this appreciative approach is not, and it is not about enabling people, right? Like I want to empower people, and I also have to check my own privilege and my own knowledge and make sure that I'm not making incorrect assumptions about what I think students should know, and to be patient and walk them through the process and teach them, and hold them accountable once we've gone through that process.
Absolutely. And if I'm not mistaken, Will Massey states that there will be a session on the role and responsibilities of the advisee during the East Region Drive-In. That will be held on August 6th from 8:30 to 3 p.m. Registration is now open. It's currently $10 and it goes up to $25 on the first. Will, if that's incorrect information, please let me know in the chat box. But if I'm understanding you correctly, the role and responsibility advisee session will be during the East Region. Okay, he said that's correct. So yes, that will be during the East Region Drive-In. I think this may be the last question.
All right.
I plan to use this with adult education students who tend to already be discouraged when starting their journey. What is the best way to disarm them to gain their trust in order to discover their goals?
Yeah, this works quite well with adult students. I mean, community colleges all across the country are big users of this appreciative approach. I think why that is because it respects the knowledge and lived experience of these adult students. I think in particular in the discover phase, when you're getting to know someone, if it's an adult learner who had to drop out when they were 18 years old because they got married and started a family, and now it's 25 years later and they just got laid off their job, and so now they're coming back to work. Part of it is a confidence issue that, I don't know that I can do this, right? This imposter syndrome that we talk about. And so if we can ask students about challenges that they've overcome, and adults and 18-year-olds have often overcome a lot of challenges, that if we can kind of reflect back to them the strengths that we've seen in them as they have overcome multiple challenges up until this point. If they're a parent, I'm sorry, to be, a single parent is you learn all kinds of leadership skills. You've you know, people have overcome all of these barriers, and you can really call on those skills that you've learned dealing with those barriers and say, look, you've already overcome this, this, and this. Taking a class this fall, trust me, you can do this. You've got it in you. You've done way more challenging things than this. And so let's talk about some of the things that you've learned along the way, the strategies that you've used to balance your time between working full-time, raising your children, and, you know, this 2 other part-time jobs that you've had on top of that, right? And so helping people see that those are transferable skills that they can use in a higher education setting, because I think many times people downplay the skills that it takes to raise just a child these days are transferable into a classroom kind of setting. But it's just about helping them reframe what those experiences, instead of being negative things, to being actually really positive things that they can draw upon when they face barriers.
Absolutely. I see the question. We will get a copy of the recording. I don't know if I can send a copy of the entire recording, but it will be posted on the Facebook page. If you would like a copy of the presentation, please email me. I'll put my email in the comments again. Email me and I will email that to you once it is received. But I want to thank Dr. Bloom again for coming out and sharing her wisdom and knowledge with us. We know you could
My
have
pleasure.
in this pandemic, but we appreciate you coming out and sharing everything with us. And I just want to say my thank you. We will definitely speak again with you regarding, you know, our follow-up. And that's it. Once again, if you have any questions or comments, please email me or leave them on the Facebook page and we will address those. If you want the presentation again, please email me and I will send you a copy of it. And once again, thank you, Dr. Bloom.
Of course. Take care, everyone. Remember, everything really is figure outable.